Craig, can someone just try online?
Sound check.
Hello?
Hello?
Someone just put music on. You know,
Can you hear us yet?
someone put your speaker off. And
Go
then-
now.
Overheads.
Oh,
Sound
no, we
check.
can't hear you.
Is the
Can
volume
you hear
up?
us? I can see.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, thanks.
You know.
Stu said the same thing happened during the hospital board.
Okay.
So,
Were they meeting here?
yeah. All right, so I'm going to try something different. Tia, can someone just say something?
Yeah, I'm right here. You hear us?
Yeah, we're going to listen to you through the computer speaker.
Oh, no.
Not getting any, just want to make sure you're not getting any funny feedback or anything from us.
I don't know. Let me try talking.
Oh, you are talking, so that part's okay.
No, I'm going to try talking to see if you get feedback.
No, I know, but
There's no feedback on our end.
it's okay. So that's good. Can you see us?
I can see only you, Joe.
So if you put the computer maybe in the middle, you might be able to. You two are the most important people. Hold on.
And we can see you really close, Joe.
There we go.
Okay. Now you can see the whole room.
Thanks, Sue. I'll tell Rachel tonight. Sorry.
Maybe turn them up as much as you can in there.
Okay. So just 1 second here. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna increase the volume. I lost where the speaker is going. Thank you.
I said right there as if you knew where I was pointing.
All right, I think we can hear you, you can hear us, and you can see the room.
Yes.
We're gonna go with this very poor setup right now, and we'll talk to IT tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, Tia.
No problem. No problem. I guess my question is, where did you lose me?
Okay, 1 second, Tia. Is there, you know where it says power restart screenshot? Can you move that over? Just so I can see Andy. Is that possible? I'm not sure if it's gonna screw anything up, don't do it. But
Move it. Can you grab it, move it with the cursor? Grab it and move.
I think that's the cursor on the computer. An exit button.
Yes, it's not, that power off.
It's okay.
Isn't
Don't worry.
part of this.
It's okay, don't worry.
Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. Just so you know, Andy, there's a bar in front of your face. I can see the top of your head and below your shoulders, but I can't see your face. But it's okay, we'll be able to hear you.
Maybe waves high or low.
And no one knows how to fix that, so we're just not gonna mess with anything else.
Okay. As long as you can see the Liverpool FC banner behind me, I'm good.
We'll be fine. Okay, Tia, where did we lose you? You were talking about aquatics? Aquafit. There you go.
Oh, so you caught everything I had said up until that point.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will move on to the next section. So the next section is, we talked a little bit about sort of how the year went. This is the financial part of the programming department. So just to be clear, this is not the rest of the services. This is just what you see in programming. So a lot of our pre-registered programs and things like that. So in general, what you'll see in this next table, or these next two tables, are a comparison between 2024 and 2023. And on the whole, you will notice that our expenses, we didn't spend as much as we thought we were going to spend, and we actually made more money than we thought we were going to spend as far as revenue is concerned. So down below, if you keep going down below, we've got these next two charts, which are subsidy utilization. And so basically what that means is what our net cost is to run any of our programming services. In the first chart, you'll see S222, where in the green was what we budgeted for. So what we said we were going to need in order to run our services. versus year to date of what we actually what the cost was to actually spend, so the net cost. So this includes not only the expenses but also the revenue. And so because, as in the previous charts you had seen, that the that the expenses were less than we thought and revenue was more than we thought, our total subsidy utilization is actually a lot lower. And so in 2023, we did a 69% utilization of that subsidy, of that like net cost. And in 2024, we did 46%. Moving to S227, you'll see, which is our S227 is the aquatics and fitness service area. We did a 10% utilization versus 2024. We did the exact opposite. We actually made more, like the revenue was more than it cost to actually what we spent on that service that we had coded to that service. And what that does ultimately is it contributes to the surplus, which is fantastic. But it does also mean that the programming team and their budgeted and planning practices need a little bit more refinement to try and get a little closer to what it is that we intended on spending. So not a bad thing, but some refinement is needed. Next section we go is into our user fees. And so while I didn't indicate the exact number for user fees, you can, there is a left-hand side of the chart that does show you, but memberships and admissions have seen an overall increase. So in the blue, you'll see our memberships from 2023 and 2024. And in orange, you'll see our admissions, 2023 and 2024. So overall, there has been an upward trend to people using the facility and purchasing memberships. So that's a positive, and that is S222 and S227 combined, because there is a small amount of revenue that we do receive for S222 just for the arena when it comes to public skating and some of our other drop-in programs, that they're all combined into this one chart. And next we do have facility rentals. Facility rentals, I've done over 2 charts to show not only the revenue that we've seen in the pool rooms and arena, but also the usage. And so if we scan to the second chart with the usage, you'll see that the number of hours we have rented out for our rooms has gone up from 2023 to 2024, but has stayed relatively stable between the pool and arena. And so with the room rentals, that's great to see, and it just means that people are still using the facilities in the same way. There's the same groups are still renting, and we saw a few extra events happen in our rooms over the course of the year. So moving into next steps and timeline. So that's a snapshot. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just thought before we jump into the next section, there is one question from Councillor Heaton, and then she might ask it, but I have a question too.
Fantastic.
Next part. Yeah, Councillor Heaton.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. Just a question about user fees. Do we have comparison before COVID?
I can acquire those numbers if you'd like from 2019. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just to, I know the numbers are steadily going back up to what they used to, and I just want to see are we on track, or is it going up slower? Like, what's the progression, right?
Through the chair, yeah. I think a comparison in how many were sold is probably the best comparison, considering user fees have changed as far as what we charge for our facilities. So yes, I am able to provide numbers for 2019 at a next meeting or through email. I don't know how you'd like to receive them.
Yeah, that's fine. Next meeting, and then just a supplement question. Do you think that we're getting more sold just individual emissions because we're screening more people, because of the wristbands, we're picking up more people?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Oh, sorry, like, you know how we have wristbands now, right? So do you think those emissions are going up because we're actually catching everybody as they're going in, because it's mandatory, right? I know in the past people have walked in without paying, so.
Joe, go ahead.
So through the chair, that comparison, Sue, that would be a great question when we look at that 2019 numbers compared to these numbers. Unfortunately, we're not going to see that shift like we saw in Nelson, where one day there was no wristbands and the next day there was, just because we actually have this gap in these years of where we were actually closed. So, but what we can look at, when you see those 2019 to 2024, there could be some indication of that. I don't know that we're going to be able to see a real good comparison, because we didn't have that we're busy, we changed the practice, now we can see the difference, kind of a situation.
Good. I just like it that the numbers are going up, so that's good.
So through the TIA, just to be clear, like on the, it says user fees, which is a chart that's showing how many we sold and what the revenue is from those ones that sold. Just checking the memberships for 2024. Okay, sorry, I get it now. 2000, got it. It's okay. Forget it.
It was my question too, and then I read it a little closer and figured it out. So we're probably thinking the same thing, and I answered my own question as Sue was talking. Is there any other questions on the first half of this report before we jump into the next steps?
No.
Okay, not seeing any. Go over to you, Tia.
Through the chair, thanks. Okay, so next
Sorry,
step.
Chair,
Yeah.
I did have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I've skipped ahead, and when I'm looking at with all the increases in revenues and less expenses, the number I see as an operational surplus is $114,958. So the first part of your report, I guess a question through the chair to somebody that knows this, maybe Joe. So basically, with all of the differences in the user fees and you know, our expenses that we, you know, budgeted for that we didn't spend, does all that generate that $114,958 operational surplus number in the financial plan? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so through the chair, Director Davidoff is referring to the budget report. So you're not going to find that number in the programming report, just to make sure everybody knows where Director Davidoff is getting the. It will form part of that, Andy. When we get into the budget, the budget report, we'll get into more detail about where the surplus came from.
Okay, thanks.
But you are correct. Yeah.
Okay, Tia, on to you for the second half. Thanks.
No problem. All right. So next steps is looking basically into 2025 and beyond a little bit. The programming team has put a focus for 2025 on three major areas. So meaning when we make decisions about what it is that we want to do, the directions that we'd like to go, we really want to keep the three of these points in mind. And I'm just, sorry. I just want to make sure I have my right notes here. So with these three, we're looking at accessibility to services. That's something that's been on the forefront with the different boards committees that have been working on inclusion and access. So a lot of the decisions that are made with programming will keep some of those things in mind, and you'll see that down below when we talk about the things that we're looking for changes. Customer service, that's another one. That's not only customer service to the public, but also the customer service to the people who work in the building. So people who, different department areas that work within each other, making sure that everyone is a customer of themselves. And when we help each other, we do a better job of helping the public. And the third point is around standardization. And so standardization is to ensure that the way we do things is not only standard within the facility of how we do things from program area to program area, but also to how we do that within the regional district, and making sure that the services that we provide are done similarly. Understanding there are differences, obviously, in each community, our approach is always going to be very similar. So some of the goals, or some of the projects that are going to continue on with the programming team over 2025 will have continued work on space allocation, sponsorships, data collection and analysis, which is something that I've talked about in previous meetings, program costing analysis, really rooting down the costs of what it is to generate, like how much it costs to actually run a program, not only direct costs, but some of those indirect costs in and staffing and facility use and etc., as well as budgeting refinement, which you have seen in the previous charts in regards to subsidy utilization. Around user fees, there are more projects that we're going to be doing that are going to impact in what we do around user fees. So that's around updating procedures for our data input. So how information gets put into our Explore software, usually from our front desk staff, but making sure that it stays consistent so that we can pull very consistent and accurate data. Our data collection and analysis methods, as well as a formal patron feedback process. So one of the things that we're wanting to really ramp up with 2025 is to get a process in place on how we can not only collect information about how people are viewing our services and our programs and evaluating, but also being able to do something with that in a meaningful way that the programmers can make decisions on and improve program quality and just improve processes in general. In programming, some of the things that we're looking forward to in 2025 is in camps. We are pushing registration start date even sooner than we did in 2024. From the feedback that we received from public, stating that there are other programs in the community over the summer that they would like to have better access to register all at once, as opposed to thinking they might get in one and not in the other, allowing a best fit for their child to decide which type of programming for the summer that they want to put their children in. So giving families enough time to plan their summers. That's a really important thing that we're trying to push for 2025. We are looking for, I believe it's middle of April, registration start date for camps, which might seem awful early to you guys, but to families, it's actually really, really helpful. We will continue to promote camp programming, as well as research into the skills and talents that lie in the community. I don't know if any of you have noticed, we've put out an expression of interest to see what skills and talents lie in our communities, to see if there's anyone that would like to help out with camps and help specifically the specialized camp themes that we're going to plan for the summer. They were very popular in 2024, and we want to make sure that we're tapping into the community members that have those talents that can teach our children. In the arena, as you know, we've got some ice programming some creative ice programming that has to happen with the closing of the Pioneer Arena. So that will look as to how we might redevelop some of our approach to how we do programming in the arena, and how we work with some of those user groups to make sure that we've got proper representation for the different users of the arena, as well as improving public access to the ice. And in fitness, we're not looking at lots and lots of changes. We're focusing more on that standardization piece for fitness, how to better serve our communities using the resources that we have available, standardize our internal processes, make things smoother on the customer service end, just some refinement there. And then in aquatics, we reduced the budget in aquatics slightly. As you noticed, there was quite a surplus. So for the 2025 budget, we did reduce slightly, just to be a little bit more accurate with with the actual demand that we had for our lessons and with the availability of staff. We will be launching an adapted lesson service for 2025 for spring. Actually, coming up in the spring guide, there will be an option for adapted swim lessons, and that is something that is not necessarily new, but hasn't been done in a very formal way. So this is our launch to adapted swim lessons. The funded training program I've spoken about in previous meetings will continue. We will be having that focus to fill those gaps in staffing, as well as providing access to training opportunities for employment. So there's that accessibility piece, accessibility to services, that we're trying to also fit in with. And continuing training for swim instructors, and reviewing of some of our programming, including Aquafit, to look at some of those industry standards to make sure that we are on trend and moving forward with the industry. And I guess last piece is around our facility rentals. The biggest piece for 2025 that we're focusing on is added promotions for some of our less utilized ice times over spring break and summer. We're going to be doing some extra promotions just to let others know that that ice is available. The ice is available for rent, so we can start to optimize the usage in our rental spaces. And you will continue to see quarterly reports similar to this, speaking on trends, speaking on goals, and how participation is happening in the facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. I've got a question from Commissioner Heaton first, and then if anyone else put their hand up, then I'll capture you.
I have two questions. The fitness center, are we going to do any additional promotions there, since, just not even a block away is going to be a brand new 24-hour fitness center that opens by the chamber there? Are we going to try to get a unique niche for ours so we continue to have some people paying into it?
Very interesting. I don't actually have an answer for that. I imagine once we know more about when that facility will start to open, we do regard ourselves more as a community gym. So I feel like, to find that niche may not be necessarily what we're trying to achieve, but it may be putting more effort to show how the community can use our facilities a little bit more. So yes, yes, I was not aware that a 24-hour fitness was going in.
Yeah, and I think it opens next week, actually. So Yeah, so I was thinking like, our cost is going to be cheaper than them and family. You can, get it passed. You can go for a swim, a hot tub. Those are kind of the things I was thinking. The second thing is with camps, if there's more families registering than what we have instructors for camps, are we going to try to add more if we can get people, the instructors, or because in the past we've had like lists of people on a waiting list?
Yeah, our wait lists haven't been extraordinarily large compared to other communities like Nelson, where they have quite a few on the wait list, and it's only within capacities to hire staff that we can operate. But yes, if we start to notice that there starts to be more of a need for extra staff, we would hire. And knowing that we start registrations in April this year, this would give us time to react if we needed more staff. Certainly, with the structures that we have right now with camps, adding an additional staff member, a monitor, would increase the ratios that we would permit in a camp. So it wouldn't be terribly difficult to add staff if we needed to.
Good. And just to supplement to that, do we get some funding for that, right? Do we apply for funding for some of the camps?
Oh, yes, the Canada Summer Jobs. We do apply every year for Canada Summer Jobs. Not every community is successful every year or get exactly what we're asking for, but there is some that does come, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tia on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Tia. We are moving over to Glade Regional Park Upgrades Project. Is that over to you, Carrie?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. And through the chair. So last commission meeting, we had a discussion just about kind of what was happening at Glade, and said that I'd come back with just an update report and show the options that we brought to the community, and just kind of give a little bit of an update on sort of the survey results and, really our next steps. So hopefully everybody had a chance to read it. I know it's a little hard when you get to the options on the computer because it's so big, but if you have it in front of you in paper, then that can, kind of show really the whole the whole options, the two options that we provided to the community. So ultimately, it's we brought these two options to the community. It does sort of describe a little bit in the background how we went back in 2019, and originally it was just going to be, a shelter. And then we had an opportunity, through some discussion, other people wanted some other things. So we did bring this. And again, we had a very, differencing of points of view for a number of the members in the community. So really what we sort of saw was that people didn't really like one or the other options necessarily, but they liked parts of the options. And really it depended on who you were talking to. Some people liked, different parts of the options, and other ones didn't like any option. So we did include in here not only the two options, but just so you could kind of see people's comments back in there as well. So I don't, in the survey charts, that's where you can kind of see really the top priorities were sort of washrooms, garbage, and then we had kind of the beach area and a safe swim area, and then fixing up the parking, and then picnic area, benches, trees, and gazebos. So again, there was a really mix. Those priorities kind of came out as what someone had said in those surveys of each and every one of those versus, kind of like a whole package. So really trying to provide the next steps with what we wanted to do, and kind of noting also that the safe swim area is something that'd be very difficult for us to do on a river that's changing flows and everything else. There's, quite a lot of a risk there of us actually saying that, hey, we're going to provide a swim area to do that. So there would be a lot involved with trying to make something like that happen, including probably a fair number of permits and things like that. So it's one of the reasons we just sort of indicated in there that it's, that is something that we may not be able to provide that they wanted. And I think a lot of this has to do with the closure of North Beach, which was historically a place that people went to glade, but it was shut down due to a fair number of reasons. And it's one of the reasons why that we sort of put into the options that, hey, maybe there's an opportunity that we can create just a beach area where people can kind of go down and sit on the beach and by the water, but we wouldn't really be providing some place for someone to swim. So I don't know if there's any questions on this. Really, our timeline is to finish up, send something off to the ALC, because really until we get something out to the Agricultural Land Commission providing us with a non-farm or a recreational permit, a non-farm use permit, that's kind of the first step. But we really needed to have some sort of drawings or something put in front of us to be able to say, hey, this is what we're looking at. From our experience in the past of doing something within the Agricultural Land Reserve, some of the things that they really require are fencing. That's a big one. Just, separate lands, and then, just making sure that the uses sort of somewhat, fall in line with that recreational idea. And that if there's farm use around us, which there isn't necessarily farm use on the Columbia Power land, which is a long sort of linear strip along the water, I don't think that we're going to have too much, but those may take 3 to 6 months by the time you get something back with changes or requests from the ALC. So that's kind of our goal here, is to kind of look at this as option 2, which was certainly a little more popular and had a lot of the things in there that a mix of things that people wanted. Parking was something. I mean, option A, really the difference was defined parking and sort of defined landscape. People were a little bit happier with sort of a non-defined area, but a larger parking area that people could park, but not necessarily telling people where they had to specifically go. Pros and cons with that from places we've done these things as well. You do generally need a fairly long turning radius when you have boats coming in and out of places, but again, we're trying to listen to the community as well and what they were saying. So that's kind of our direction, next steps, looking what we want to do, and then really seeking some direction from the commission if this is a direction they want us to go in, or if they're looking for us to do something different.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Questions or comments from commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Davidoff.
Yeah, thanks. So through the chair, Carrie, how close are we with getting the Agricultural Land Commission approvals to do anything here?
Yeah, so we have the designs. Like I say, what we would want is just, if you notice on the options, they didn't quite go as far as we wanted to the park boundary on the other side, so that we have a little bit more land. So we would basically get that sketch just updated and send it off. So I would say we could probably do that within the next month, and then have it sent off, and then hopefully have the ALC getting back to us on some of that stuff. And then we would have to look into, certain things such as permits and anything else that we may need in that case, which we do have an idea about, but some of that may come back from the ALC.
A supplemental, Chair, if I may.
Go for it.
Yeah, have we sent anything to the ALC yet? To the chair?
No, we have not.
Okay.
Commissioner Heaton.
That was me? Did you?
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
I thought you said me, but I wasn't quite sure. Just a question. So timeline, we're looking probably for this to be open like next year, kind of. It's going to take 3 to 6 months for agricultural land.
But through the chair, I can't say. They have usually a 30 to 60 day sort of response, but sometimes in the response they have other questions. And we have had something that came back fairly quick, and we've also had something that took 6 months. So really, I think it depends on how busy they are as well. So I can't really necessarily say on their end, but I would think that there was opportunity that we should have something back within, 5 to 6 months on being able to start doing some construction. And again, really, I think some of that would be, getting fencing up, defining the area, doing, stuff like the washroom and think that if that's what, we're looking to do, and garbage cans like those, we can start having some of those things built prior to, to the end of the year for sure, to get some of those things ready to go. Again, understanding that the minute we put a washroom in and a garbage and things like that, there from that point there does become a maintenance cost, right? That's something that we will have to do to continue to maintain those at a general standard that we do as staff in the regional district, all our other parks.
Yeah, so just supplemental. So I was going to talk about cost. Is this going to be what the budget is for this? And then just the OMA going forward, right? The operation and maintenance of it,
yeah, through the chair. So in a lot of the other areas that we have, and of course, any place that we have a washroom or garbage cans, there is the cleaning and sort of janitorial costs. And depending on the use, I'll just give an example. So Lardo Regional Park right now, which, gets a fair number of people coming in the summer, not so much in the winter. But we do have an operational cost of about $15,000 a year for doing the grounds, plus doing the cleaning. And we have that cleaning at 5 days a week. So someone is going there in the summertime, and we claim the summer is really between April and September. We have someone going there 5 times a week to restock toilet paper, make sure the washrooms are clean. They would do less in terms of the weed whipping and sort of mowing and things like that happen around those areas. Someplace like Tagum Beach, it's sometimes, we may be going twice a day to clean, those washrooms and to clean out the garbage in the really busy time. But we do have upwards of 17,000 people a month go there in the summertime. So it is quite a bit busier. So it really does depend on the use. And that's the sort of thing that, say at Lardo, we're just starting to monitor. We're starting to get a better idea of the use and how often we have to go there. But we're just doing something for Lardo right now. And that's kind of what we're looking at for there. So could give an okay indication of kind of what we would do or what we would need, at Glade. And again, depending, because it's going to be close to the ferry, this was always a little bit of a concern, I think, the community wanted something close to the ferry so that they could go to the washroom. However, where we would place the washroom would be not directly adjacent to the road. It would be further on. So, the idea is that this is for park use, just like the garbage. A garbage can there would be for park use, not for people dumping their household, which we often have problems with, as everybody probably knows. So we strategically try to put things someplace to minimize some of those things. With the ferry, with the ferry right there and ferry drivers, they're usually pretty good at knowing what's going on. So they can usually tell us if all of a sudden we're seeing, bags of household garbage just dropped in front of the garbage can. We would probably have an idea of knowing these things. But
great. Just for those online, I think with our speakers, sometimes it's hard to hear if I'm coming in here. Joe had something to jump in. So if you're speaking online, you see me put your hand up, don't do supplemental until I check the room, because Joe had just wanted to respond, I think, Commissioner Heaton, before you jumped into your second question. So I'll jump over to Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Just through the chair, just real quick, the park is operational right now. It just doesn't have the amenities that we're talking about. So some of these costs we are incurring right now. So to Sue, it's not a brand new operation from zero to something else. Just wanted to make sure that it was understood it is operational.
Yeah, but I was just wondering the new costs, right? Because it's an added service. And so, in Maria, when you put your hand up, if somebody's talking, we can't see you. Okay. I see, yeah. So that's why I didn't stop. So I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I was just trying to, I think that the speaker was trying to figure out how to make sure you guys knew that, yeah, we'll figure it out. Be fine. Okay, so I'm assuming, Carrie, you're gonna come back when you have a decision, what's a decision you need from us with some of those costs and what you're looking at for options, correct?
Yep, through the chair. We do, I mean, there is money in the budget that's actually been carried over from the last couple of years. And as I mentioned, there's a $30,000 grant that was provided to us from Columbia Power last year that's being carried over in the surplus for this as well. So, yeah, our goal as well is once we kind of get that, we would sort of bring this back one more time, you know, to explain to the community what we're doing. I think that would be important for them to sort of understand from the results of what we had in listening, you know, this is the plan moving forward. Again, kind of looking for that kind of, I don't want to say blessing, but just sort of the approval from the commission to say that we're okay moving forward with this as it stands.
Great.
So,
Okay.
I do have one more question for Carrie and then a comment, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Carrie, through the chair, would you say that a minimalist approach is what the Glade community, the majority of the Glade community is looking at to avoid, as one survey said, avoid gentrification, to minimize ferry use and basically to keep as many people away as possible is kind of what we heard in the community meeting, and which the survey results. I mean, there's not a lot of strongly in favors, but there's a lot of strongly opposed. But the community, there was a consensus at the community meeting for this minimalist approach. You know, to add an amenity like a washroom, things like that, but really, you know, define the area, but not do a lot more. Would that be an accurate reflection of what you have in your report and what the community meeting results were?
Yeah, through the chair, I'd say that's close. I mean, I think some of the surveys that we had from people that weren't there were maybe a little bit different than some of the people that were at. We actually had, you know, more people strongly in favor of certain things within those options from those that weren't at the meeting. I mean, it was a pretty strong meeting on some individuals saying that they just don't want anybody coming anywhere near Glade, and they don't want anyone else coming on the ferry, and, you know, that sort of thing. I will say, you know, I mean, it's sometimes, and the minimalist idea is true to some degree. I mean, we're looking at a phased approach. You know, we kind of put a couple of things in, you know, whatever the agricultural land reserve, which I know they will ask for fencing and things, will be the first things that we do. And then we'll look to kind of, you know, those, maybe a washroom and some garbage cans, and then we'll kind of move on to, you know, some other things in the following years as we move forward to what was in the, you know, recommendations in the options and from the community. So I would say that's somewhat correct. But again, I think we had some more positive kind of feedback from some of the things that people wanted from those that weren't actually at the meeting. And again, it's when you have a group that is so diverse in terms of what they want, you know, to be honest, no matter what we do, someone isn't going to be happy, but we're trying to make the majority of people happy and do something for the community. And I think often, you know, when we do something and people see that it works and that it's actually nice, we actually end up getting sort of more comments of, hey, can you do more? Certainly what we found in a lot of places as we've, you know, done park amenity upgrades, we've had a lot of, you know, really good comments once it's there. I will just use Crescent Valley Beach as a perfect example. In the community meeting, sometimes we had, you know, very differencing of opinion. Once it was complete, we very seldom had people that were upset with what happened. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So it's just kind of the way it goes. And yeah, we look forward to, you know, moving forward a little bit with some of these things, and hopefully again, the community is happy with it, and you know, we'll be happy to provide it.
My comment, Chair, is that we're going to dip our toe in the water, pun intended, and we'll have a phased approach, and then we'll just keep moving forward. And I think that's what's going to work here. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks for all you've done.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
No further questions. So we are going to move on to the hot topic of the night, 7.3 2025 draft budget. Handing over to you, Joe.
Craig is going to begin the get in the conversation.
Okay, hand it over to Craig.
Through the chair, can you hear me first?
No, you're very quiet.
I don't know what to do about that, Chair. Am I still quiet?
A little, we can hear, just maybe yell a little and we'll be able
I normally yell, maybe, yeah, I'll do my best. Can you see the presentation, Chair?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Chair. Joe, I'm not sure if you can alter the volume, but I'll try to, maybe the people in the lobby here in Creston will hear this too, so.
Yeah, just, Craig, we're next. Carrie was very loud and clear, and so was Tia. Sorry, not that Tia was loud, Carrie was loud. Maybe just, it's your microphone volume.
I don't know, it works for everything except these Zoom meetings. I don't even know what to say. I'll keep playing around here. System as system, let's try.
There we go.
So, it's a Zoom setting, it's not the microphone. I did not change the microphone, just letting you know. Okay, I'm glad you can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm glad you can hear me. And so we're going to start, and through the agenda package, there was 2 documents presented that included a review of 2024 to 2025 budget and the 5-year plan. So I'll speak quickly to the 2024 review. And we talked a little bit about this at the January meeting. We have a little bit more information for the commission to talk about both budgets 222 and 227, but I'll go through this really quick. And at any time, certainly, you heard Tia's report on programming, financial performance, but Tricia or Joe or Tia can step in, and if there's anything we need to add as it relates to those pieces or others related to this budget discussion, feel free. I can only see a small screen, so you will have to, Chair, you will have to get my attention with sound.
So, Chair, just a point of order, if we can.
Yep, Commissioner Nato, go for it.
Yeah, so what we're seeing now, was this shared with us or not?
Through the chair, the information that I'm presenting in this presentation is in the package that you have already in front of you. This is information that is part of the attachments and in the report. So I'm basically taking the bullets out of the report and speaking to them. Sorry, it's more for a visual representation of the report.
Yeah, so that's why it looks different from what the package is, but this is actually the highlights. So could this be sent to us as well?
It will, you bet.
Okay, thank you.
So Craig, I'll let you run through your presentation and stop at any point that you think is a natural stop, and then we'll let questions so that we don't get bogged down on every slide. So okay. I'll leave that in your hands to go through as much of the overview, and then we'll stop and take questions.
Thanks, Chair. So for S222, rental income was $72,000 more than budgeted, which is good news. The question about where user fees were in 2019, I think that this rental income, we've exceeded 2019, even with the increases in rates. We can do that analysis, as Tia pointed out, maybe at a future meeting. But this number, rental income for revenue for the arena, is a really good sign. Expenses on the arena side, salaries were on budget. Repairs and maintenance, operating supplies and equipment, as we mentioned at the January meeting, were slightly underspent. And capital, if you remember, we had amended the capital budget at a meeting previously in 2024. So we had the amended capital budget of $1.007 million. We spent $283,000 of that, mostly on materials for the roof of the arena. And just a quick rundown on capital. There are some expenses in the projects. As Carrie had pointed out, the Glade project had $130,000 in the budget, funded partially through a grant. And that we hadn't kicked that project off, so we hadn't spent any. The arena doors was a project that came along as part of that financial plan amendment. We hadn't actually spent any money on that in 2024. There was some remaining costs for the arena floor replacement that came to us, and the consultants had verified that money was outstanding. So we have paid that. That wasn't budgeted for, but we did owe that to the contractor. The arena or the rooftop units, the $16,000 was actually spent installing the unit that was purchased in 2023 even though we had budgeted 75,000 for new units for 2024. So we had spent 16,000 from the previous year's budget and hadn't actually spent any on this year's rooftop units. The arena roof coating, as I pointed out, we spent 200,000 on materials. That's in storage right now. And the arena roof insulation, which was also added to the financial plan through that amendment, we spent $9,700 on consulting to date. And you'll see that budget change as I go through the 2025 capital plan. And the Pioneer Arena decommissioning at $100,000, we haven't spent any money on that. I'll stop there if there's any questions.
Any questions on slide one?
Okay,
I'm not
thank you.
seeing, unless Brian has one, because I can't see him. But I think we're good.
Thanks, Chair.
No questions for me.
Thanks,
Okay.
Chair. To Director Davidoff's question from earlier, and Joe's in the room, so he can back me up on this. But Joe calculated how we had arrived at the surplus for S222, knowing that part of the capital was funded through requisitions, of course, and through growing communities funds and through other sources. And so Joe has calculated the surplus analysis, and 82,000 from the Columbia Power funding from 2023, 555,000 from capital requisitions not spent, 10,000 from the Castlegar Youth Service, and approximately 114,958. It's not an approximate number; it's a pretty good number on operational surplus. And I hope that answers Director Davidoff's questions from earlier. But if you have any others, we'll answer them now.
Not seeing any.
Thanks, Chair.
Just really quick,
Oh,
so through the chair to Henny and Andy, probably just at some point, doesn't have to be today, but I just want to remind you of that funding that you have for grants, which is that Castlegar Youth Service piece. So there's a corresponding expense line in the budget for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Heaton, did you have a question?
That's what my question was. What is that for, the Castlegar Youth Service? So thanks, Joe.
Yeah, so, and I just want to comment on that too, Chair, if that's possible.
Sure, as long as it stays on budget. Yeah, go for it.
It's on the surplus from Castlegar Youth Service. So basically that came from the closing of, we had a youth service and then the station closing that we were funding and on and on. So when Joe, you say that's available for area INJ to utilize for things that we're doing in INJ that are outside of the rec service, sort of budgeted items, but still is within the mandate of the rec service. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the participants in that service that closed was areas I and J. So I have that right now. It's just budgeted into grants, but it's unallocated grant money. So if you so choose, if there's something that you would like us to do to ask the community, or if there's an internal piece that you want us to do, you do have that funding available.
Okay, so then I have a supplemental question to Stuart through the chair.
Yep.
Is Stuart on?
He was.
Stuart, you there?
The chair, I'm here.
Okay, I just want to raise something here, a question. In light of the changes, the paradigm shift of how community works funding has changed. Some of us are in a really horrible position when it comes to providing grants to third parties in particular. I know Area I has very small community development grant budget and a small discretionary grant budget. And without the ability of utilizing community works funding to third parties, I guess my question to Stuart is that similar to this line item, the surplus from Castlegar Youth Service, is it possible for us to pay for community projects in our areas and provide community works funding, but do it through an item or a line item similar to this, where if they're, like, say if we identify that we're going to, that we need certain projects, like, I think you get where I'm going. Is that possible for us to do something like that? I think you get an idea of where I'm going. Maybe you could help me out a little bit here through the chair to Stuart.
Yeah, through the chair, just for perhaps the commission's benefit, just a little bit of a quick background here is that the new UBCM funding agreement has really cracked down on third-party grants, and that's a significant portion of the community works funding that the regional district sends out there. So there's a lot of community groups, community halls, outdoor projects, all run by societies who get grants through community works. And UBCM is trying to bring more of the funding through the agreement sort of in-house and focus on local government infrastructure. And there's been a lot of discussion at the Rural Affairs Committee about how, yes, we have a lot of local government infrastructure at the RD, but we also have a lot of societies and organizations who operate similar style infrastructure outside of the regional district organization, and how can we continue to fund those? And we've been trying to work on a way that we can make sure we're meeting the needs of the UBCM agreement and still being able to support some of these groups through the projects that the directors want to support. And one of the ideas that we have is, since we have recreation services, we've got library services, we've got services with different mandates, that if the project being funded fell within the mandate of either S222 or S227, that Director Davidoff or Director Hennegraaff could provide the community works grant to the service, and then the service would provide the community works grant to the organization. What we would probably need in order to do that was, through your budget process, we'd need those projects identified. And then you'd probably need to pass a motion at the commission level that says the commission is supportive of these sub-regional projects and feels that they're complementary to the regional district services that are being offered through the recreation services, something along those lines, to show that there is commitment from the RD that these are priority projects. But yes, I do think it's something that we could manage through the service, as long as they fit the scope of the recreation services that we have.
Yeah, so supplementary, Chair.
Yep.
Yeah. So, thank you, Stuart, for that. That kind of is really, really important, particularly for, like I says, Area I. We have no affected area funding. We have no, ready grant affected area funding. We have very, very few grant funds to allocate, except for the community works grant funds. But for example, like I got a call from the Doukhobor Discovery Center from Ryan, and the city of Castlegar owns that asset, and I thought that I'd have no problem committing community works funds, and I understand the minimum now is not 10,000 but 25,000 is the minimum. Stuart, correct me on that if I'm wrong. But the other part is that, because if it's culture, arts, or recreation, which is within Service 222 mandate, Services 222 mandate, not within the Aquatic Center mandate. But if there's something that was aquatic related, I think that would be a lot harder. Like if I wanted to do washrooms at Sure Acres Beach, or give a grant to, which is not a regional district amenity. Like if it's for Glade Regional Park, that's easy. But for, say, Sure Acres Beach, if I were to provide a grant to build washrooms there, like could that be a service? Because it's recreation, it'd still be potentially a service S222 enabling bylaw mandated service that we could support. But I have three CBT grants that have come through to support 3 community halls. Actually, no, not
Mr. Davidoff?
Yep.
I'm just wondering if, because we don't have all the information on this yet, if we can maybe ask staff to allocate some time in one of our meetings to discuss exactly what you're talking about. How do we do this? And what would that look like, so that we can make sure we get through our budget? I know there's a few that I need to be somewhere for 6 o'clock, like to actually get through our meeting. So is that okay if we leave that with staff and get them to come back with some how do we do this? Like how do with those changes, how do we make sure that we best support our sub-regions?
Yeah, Chair, I just have one line left to finish and then I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, it's just bundling. So, for example, if there are 3 CBT-supported projects that require 25% funding, but none of those are over 25,000 or more, they're all under 25,000. Could staff then look at, okay, I can bundle all those, provide a $25,000 or more community works grant to pay for all 3 of them. So that's just something I just want to put out there for staff to consider, because the rules have changed from 10,000 to 25,000 minimums. And I know staff's working on this, but we need to get this sorted in this budget round, because right now I have a whole bunch of grant applications stacked up that I'm not approving. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So we'll leave that with staff to find some of those answers and make sure they get back to us and figure out the how. And I'm assuming at any time, even if we pass the budget, if it's a flow through money like you're talking about, we can amend our financial plan to include those. Is that correct? Yeah, Stuart's saying that. So we'll make sure that we're not tying your hands for a whole year. I think we've got some room to move in there. Okay. Commissioner Heaton, is it?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask the same thing, to have because that's all new to me, right? So I would like some background information on how this would work.
Great.
Yeah,
okay.
Especially if people, sorry?
No, it's okay. I was just going to say we'll jump back in then to budget, and yeah, we'll make sure you add in. Okay, good, thanks. Over to you, Craig, back to presentation.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just share again. Just give me the thumbs up if you can see that. Thank you. Next slide. So for the budget for S222 requisitions is a decrease of 11%, mostly due to surplus. Rental income is an increase of $24,000 over budget from 2024. I'm just looking at it.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Joe's just saying the requisition's not right. Did you want to correct something?
No, sorry. So the explanation, the reason that S222 went down is primarily because of the shift between the capital funding between S222 and S227. So that's the greater portion of why that requisition came down.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Programming decrease 15% as per TIA's report, just trying to fine tune the programming offerings. Proceeds from borrowing, which you'll notice was not part of the conversation last meeting, but to cover the capital, we're looking at planning to borrow about $911,000, and revenue was a surplus from prior year of $762,000. On the expense side, and I appreciate that that's a graphic on the right-hand side of the page. You have the report in your hands that you could look at that document. I don't expect you to squint to see that, but the expenses for salaries, CPI and bargaining, we still are we're essentially behind on our collective agreement that expired in February of 2024, and so we're looking at getting back to the table here in February and March and lining up a 2-year deal as quickly as we can, and then we'll see the impacts of that in the budget. We do have that anticipated inside of with CPI and bargaining inside of the anticipated salaries number as well. We'll see a decrease in previous year's trend for the Pioneer because it is closing this year. We're having I believe March. There's a early March is the last date that it's open. I can't speak to the actual date right now. Expenses are mostly flat compared to 2024, not because we don't need it, but we're just trying to find that spot between what we plan for and what we can actually commit to. So we try to keep contracted services, repairs and maintenance, operating supplies as flat as we can, just to ensure we have room in the budget for other things. Consulting fees, the engagement project, there is $55,000 as part of that consulting fees line that is for the engagement project. A small contribution to reserves, and a big capital number of $2.19 million, and I'll speak to that really quickly. A lot of that is carried forward from last year with the arena roof coating, the Glade project. The arena doors was $100,000, and the refrigeration for the Pioneer, the decommissioning. But also we do need another $25,000 to do the arena doors. If you can imagine that, we need an architect involved now when anytime we do anything on the building envelope, and so then they have to bring in a structural engineer to ensure that changing out our doors is done properly. So we've had to add a little bit to that project. The arena roof installation, as we discussed last month, includes the low E ceiling option. That budget is $450,000, and the roof repairs over the lobby is $885,000. Last year we had tentatively budgeted $780,000, so it was a significant increase over what we had thought last year it would cost us for this year. But the one thing I wanted to comment about the roof repairs, and this is for S227, is that we're going to pay a bit of a premium. We're going to tender it and engineer it and tender it so that we land with a 40-year repair. So we plan that the roof repair will cost us a little bit more, but it will also have a guarantee of a certain length, not the full 40 years, but we are intending that is a 40-year repair. So there is something to consider about how that is funded, and we'll talk about that later on in the presentation. And then for S222, the 5-year financial plan at a high level, requisition increase to offset interest for borrowing and moderate capital plans, and long-term capital planning is ongoing. We are still, you'll notice that in the 5-year plan, some of the capital numbers trend up and they trend down. And in fact, in 2029, there's zero for capital, but $533,000 to reserves. That's because we don't yet know exactly what we're going to spend the money on in 2029, and we don't. So we're still looking at planning, and a couple of reports coming at us regionally that should help inform that. So that was S222. If there's any questions about S222 before we move on to S227.
Great. Any questions from commissioners?
Yeah. Okay, so I've got a few. If with the chair's indulgence, is that okay? Or
As long as you keep them really tight.
I'll do my best. So the first one is requisition. So we're looking at 11% decrease in requisition, and that's line item 41010 requisitions. And we can't see the full thing on your screen there, but I'm looking at the print based. Our requisition in 2025 is $2,829,472, which is an 11% decrease from the $3,138,218 from 2024. But in 2026, we're looking at moving up to 3,358, which is like that's way over 11%. So we're reducing requisition by 11%, but then what we're doing is we're increasing it by more than 11% in 2026. So am I reading that correctly? And we are also we're only contributing $3,000 to reserves in the 2025 budget, but then in the 2026 budget, we're contributing $262,000 to reserves. So could you kind of walk us through that? Am I reading this correctly? And
yeah, through the chair, I know Joe can speak to this a little bit better, but if you look at the borrowing, the $911,000, and as I mentioned, that 40-year roof repair, the life of that asset could allow you to borrow over a longer period of time than 5 years. And if you borrowed that over 20 years, certainly the interest over 20 years would be more than the interest over 5 years. But the hit to requisitions and the operation would be reduced on an annual basis that would allow you to change the requisitions to benefit other parts of the operation and other parts of the asset management plan. That is, and Joe, if that's the logic behind the reduction in requisitions.
Joe?
Yeah, so to Director David, if we let Craig get through this piece, when we go to the very last sheet, then I think it'll be easier to walk you through that there. But you need to keep in mind a couple of pieces about your strategy throughout.
Okay.
Number one is that every year we increase the requisition by $100,000 to fund capital until it reaches, the hope is that when we reach 1 million, we kind of hit an equilibrium state for both services. But that money is actually moving. Where we're doing the requisition is changing between S222 and S227. So that amount is changing. So when we get, it's easier to look at that capital plan almost completely separately. But I want you to know one thing that's very important in both S222 and S227 this year. This year you are funding partially, it's not a lot, but it is money, your operational requisition. So what you fund for requisitions for operations is actually dipping a little bit. It's dipping because of the surpluses. So because those are operational surpluses, so what that means, which is a choice, is that we could apply more of the surplus to capital. But there were so many options when Craig, Trish, and I were looking at this budget, I had to narrow it down to the most logical piece. And that is, if it was an operational surplus, I applied that to operations. If it was a surplus from capital, that stayed inside the capital budgets. That stayed there. So what you see, what's really hard because we have these two things together, is that your actual requisition that you're funding for operations in both S222 and S227 are slightly lower than what they would normally be if we didn't have surplus. But Craig, as he's walking through the budget, will also tell you that our budget, sorry, I'm going to tell you, I guess, by doing this, that's kind of a stupid thing, but that we're budgeting for full operations of the aquatic center so we can reach that as soon as we can, but we're not there yet. So like we're caught in this funny world of that budget, because believe me, I am trying to look forward as to not doing the shock on the budget in any one year. So we're just trying to be as clear as we can. But I think it's better if Craig continues through the operational piece, and then we'll get into that long-term capital plan.
Okay, Commissioner Davidoff, did you have more questions at this point, or are we going?
I sure do. Actually, what Joe just shared has generated a lot of questions, but I'll hold off. And I think what I heard Joe say is that let Craig work through the S222 expense part, or include S227 and then ask questions.
I think if it's, why don't we do this? If there's anything specifically around clarification on line items, we'll ask right now. But if it's anything on the full budget and what that might impact, we'll save that till the end. Because I'm hearing that once we hear the whole package, some of that will become clear. So I'll put you on the list, Commissioner David. I'll make sure.
I'll tell you what my issue is that we're facing a 25% increase in S227 and an 11% reduction in S222, and I'm trying to reconcile what's happening here. Okay, yeah. That's where I'm at, Chair. Just so you know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll let Craig continue, and then we'll see if we can figure some of that out. I noticed the same thing.
Thanks, Chair. Through the Chair, so 2027, same, we'll do a bit of a 2024 review. Revenue, programming revenue exceeded budget by 21%. User fees exceeded budget by $43,656, which is significant as per the conversation about user fees and people paying now and using wristbands maybe contributed to it. The increase in our fees as of September may have contributed to it, but that's a really good trend in all of our centers, that user fees through aquatics and fitness, especially with memberships and passes, are trending in the positive direction. Expenses for S227, salaries were below budget. Repairs and maintenance, operating supplies and equipment were underspent. In the capital, we had a minimal capital budget. We spent about $2,000 on the RTU work, again, installing from a 2023 purchase. That's probably, could be coded at 222, but that's a cleanup piece. But the conversation about the lockers, I looked into that. It was originally added to the locker. We had a change in staff through 2024, and the original intent was to replace all the lockers with coin-operated lockers. And after that staff changed, the intent changed where we realized that the lockers are still quite usable, and we do not need to go to, nor do we want to go to the coin-operated lockers. And so that's where that $60,000 did a bit of a switch on us mid-year, and that for Director Hennegraff's question, that's the reason why we didn't change those. Those are still quite usable, and we repair them as we need to, but we were planning on changing them to coin-operated. And the surplus, and this is my comment, I believe it's mostly from operating $200,000 for S227, Joe, if that sounds right to you?
That is correct.
Thanks, Joe. Revenue projections, so getting into budget for, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I think there's probably a quick clarification, not to derail from budget, from Commissioner Henry.
Yeah, just on the lockers. First of all, when the discussion happened around replacing the lockers, there was no mention of coin-operated lockers, because I know there would be blowback on that for sure. So that's a surprise. And again, I'm gonna say once we approve something, we shouldn't have to find out that it's not going to happen because someone asks a question in a meeting and that's how it gets uncovered. I think things really do need to be more transparent than that. And that's my last word on it.
Thanks. Okay, back over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. So into 2025 revenue projections, requisitions increased by 25%, mostly flat for sales of service rentals and user fees. So we're at that trend, kind of like the sweet spot where we're like, we think that this is where we're going to be, and so we're going to try to keep things relatively flat. We have a bit of an increase in user fees, $35,000, but everything else is relatively flat. Transfer from reserves, $1.2 million to cover off the capital, which we'll speak to in a second, mostly roof repairs. And as I mentioned earlier, surplus of $200,000 is added to the revenue. On the expense side, salary increase again for CPI and bargaining, same situation, same union on the other side in aquatics. And as Joe mentioned, we budgeted to allow for the aquatics increase to full hours as of January the 1st. Now we're already into February, and so we know that at least 1 month of the year we won't be there. But this could be reduced, this could be prorated and finalized based on the direction we get. The one thing I will say is we are short supervisory staff in aquatics. They are on a leave. We're not sure when they're coming back, and it's a critical position where we're not able to readily fill from within. And so realistically, it is looking more like the third quarter, the start of the third quarter for 2025, for us to go from 70, I think we're at 78 hours a week, to 83, 84 hours a week. And we can adjust the budget, but if the strategy is to keep the requisitions then we will do as directed. Other expenses kept close to zero as compared to 2024, as I mentioned. In equipment, though, we are looking at purchasing a fitness treadmill exerciser. That's about $15,000, so that equipment budget is slightly higher than last year. And capital is $1.675 million, which is $75,000 for a rooftop unit, and $1.6 million for roofing repairs, which we discussed at the last meeting. Was we had planned on those 4 roofs being repaired for $1.3 million this year, and the revised number coming back at $1.6 million based on a number of market factors, and that's where the capital is. And in the S227 5-year financial plan, flat requisitions, moderate capital plans, and moderate contribution to reserves. Long-term capital planning is still in development. You'll notice in 2027 there's zero in capital, but a modest 80,000 in contribution to reserves for S227. Any questions about S227 before we talk about the funding?
Yes, Chair, if that's okay.
Yep, Commissioner Davidoff, and I can't see the other two online, so if you have anything, just, oh, there we go, now I can. Go over to you, Commissioner Davidoff.
Okay, so then I just want to confirm that for 2025, we're looking at a 25% increase in requisition from 1.202 million to 1.502 million, correct?
Correct.
And despite transfers from reserves and everything else, we're still looking at that, and there will be no contribution to reserve in 2025, even though we're not finished the program yet, correct?
No, that's true, Chair, or through the chair. And you know the one thing, like I said, that was poorly timed. I would say poorly timed, but bad luck was the estimate from the consultant on the roof repair. So there was about $280,000 that we hadn't anticipated being in the 2025 budget just for that roof repair.
So through the Andy, this year you will have no reserves left if all the projects come in at the cost that we expect them to come in at, and we get the work done. We are draining every penny out of reserves and out of both S222 and S227.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at all this, trying to process as we're running these two services as if they were one service. And that's what's confusing me. And then there's an impact on one service, not it's really tricky. Am I correct? Am I the only one that's a little confused about all this? Maybe
No, I think you're right, Commissioner David. I think the tricky part is you're dealing with one building, and so our plan that we got on needs assessment, like where we based our reserves and what we need to get up to $1 million, was based on a facility that is split between two services, and so now there's flow through between those two services in what year needs what, and that becomes the challenge, I think, for staff to figure out, because we know we need $1 million. But that $1 million might be on the arena side one year and the aquatics the next, and how do you make sure that that's equal? So you're all right. It is very convoluted. I'm not sure if there's a simpler way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So just supplemental, Chair, if I may. I'm just looking at contributions to reserves, and I look at S222, and I'm going, in 2026, we're looking at $262,000. Then it drops to $18,000. And I'm sure that's got to do with the capital expenditure piece. And then we go to 260. And then in 2029, it's 533,000 as a contribution to reserve. In service S227, we're looking at no contribution to reserves in 2025, and then 25,000 in 2026, and then we jump to 230,000 in 2028. This is like, I'm looking at it and I'm going, hold on a sec here. What are we doing? I'm sure there are valid reasons for those numbers, and it's probably tied to capital projects. But here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for smoothing. And I guess my question is to Yev, what can you show us something where we're smoothing things a little bit, like taking that 9/11, maybe borrowing over time? Because these jumps are the things that are making me really nervous, like massive jumps. So Yev, do you have any comments about how we can take a look at this and then kind of just smooth stuff out and still do what we need to do? Yev, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, through the chair, we can have a look at that budget and see if there's opportunities, but if, usually trying to smooth things out, you take from one hand and you give to the other. But I can certainly have that discussion and review that to see if there's any opportunities to do that.
Yeah, and just supplemental to Yev, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we know what we need to do, so we're not questioning what we need to do. It's just I'm seeing these zero and
Through the chair, Andy, if you let me walk you through the capital piece, like if we stick to the plan, I can explain it. Because the only way you can smooth this is by actually increasing taxation. It's by actually if you pretend that there's two completely separate services, and we increase taxation so that I can fund both completely independently, then I can do it. It's either that or we take a chance on our capital work. So I think the piece here is let me go through this. You do have some choices, but the fact of the matter is the fundamental problem is that there are two services, one building. The fundamental problem is that asset renewal doesn't come up in a neat and tidy way according to the fact that we have two services in one building. They flip sides. So if we can, before we jump thinking there's some magical solution that it's about smoothing, let me go through what these represent, and I can illustrate it pretty clearly. All right, there are choices. Like one of the fundamental choices you have is go to referendum to borrow and spread the cost out. But let me explain how that works. So if you look, we're going to just forget about the operational budget, except for one thing, because I want to point this out. This is the illustration. If you look at 2025, on the one that's marked option 1, says S222 short-term borrowing. The sheet isn't just about S222, but the short-term borrowing is the primary strategy on this sheet. So that's why it's called that. So in 2025, you can see that from your operating budgets, there's capital expenditures in S222 of $2,190,000, and in S227, a projected of $1,675,000. I need this sheet right here, and we're at that.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. All right. The next, so those are, that always on this is the exact same sheet that we had except for the numbers, it's the same format as what we had last year. So the taxation piece. So that taxation piece, that's the asset management strategy piece. So you can see in 2025, we're just going to look at the total number. This year it went from 700,000 in 2024 to 800,000 in 2025, 900,000 in 2026, million. Because the goal of the strategy was to get to $1 million and they try to manage things in that million. But remember, the million, the strategy that's $1 million between S22 and S227. Now, if you look just at 2025, what this is suggesting is that 416,720 of that 1 million is going to be in S222. Last year, that was 700,000 in S222. So you can see that 700,000 decreases to 416 in 2025. So that's that decrease in requisition in S222. Where in S227 this year, so we had 0 allocated to S227 last year. So now what we're allocating to S227 this year is 383,280. Okay? Now, this is the one place where I want you to go and just add. So we have 383,280. You go back to S227, sorry. The requisition is $1,202,000, 203. Last year. There was no the capital funding in this, although there's a capital project, it was fully budgeted to come from reserve. So this budget is actually as close for all of our rec services as we got to hitting the operational piece bang on. We had a surplus of just $8,000 coming from 2023. So if you were to add that 1,202,928 plus 383,280, we would get more than 1.502. That's where that surplus of operation comes in, right? That's that piece. So operating is helping keep this, the operational surplus is keeping this budget lower than what it could have been. All right? So that's just that piece. That's, Andy, I hope that helps that little bit of that illustration. Now, the strategy in this is that in S227, between the taxation and what we have in reserves, we can fully fund that capital work in S227. You okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Sorry, I'm sure I wasn't killing you.
No, we're not killing you. I just had to sneeze. We're good.
So we can actually fully fund that capital work. That makes things to the point a little more tidy because that means my borrowing is in S222. So S222 has 647, sorry, I'm going to start at the top, has 416,720 of the 800,000 plus the surplus of 647,252, okay, plus reserve funding of the 126,461 and 160,266. So that 160 technically is in part reserve, but it's the same taxpayers. So I'm using that to fund all the capital. We do have some capital projects planned in parks, but not to the level of 160,266. In order to fund S222 capital works, we will be required to borrow $911,000. So when I do this, like when we talked last year, any borrowing that we're doing for capital, I'm still funding that from that plan. Okay, so I'm still funding that from the plan. So the 911 is actually a little more than what I require, but in order to pay for the principal and the interest that I'm projecting for this year, I have to borrow a little more so that I keep our fundamental strategy intact. So that stays intact. So that funds all of S222 and S227, but it does deplete reserves to zero. There's none left after this year. The beauty of your strategy is that we know that as long as we're keeping the strategy, we know that we have $900,000 for capital works in 2026. Right? So we at least have that safety net of the fact that we have the strategy. So this is where, so now as we go through, if we were to go through in detail 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, all that's happening is the requisition between the two, and now maybe that taxation piece I could work on a little bit, but going through many scenarios, I just chose the path of least resistance. I can work on that piece. But what we take each year, so you see 2026 at the moment, I don't know any wood. Our budget is $415 for capital work. We have $900,000 to fund that. I'm suggesting right now that we're going to do 725 into S222. That capital piece, 725 into S222 and 175 in S227. That means there's a reserve contribution in S222. But it also means that 725 is paying the 265 plus the 198 of borrowing of principal and interest in 2026 at the bottom. Okay, so it's paying both. So that the principal and interest is always paid out of that capital funding that we've allocated. So that was a principle that I kept in this. The piece that we do have a fundamental choice on, there's actually two. One is ask Craig and maybe and some other partners that we have in the district that talk to about which are the least, and that's probably our consultant, which are the least risky things to put off. We could do that. Just know that as we've been seeing, I think Craig has had some surprising discussions with consultants this week about cost escalation. So that will also be a risk. The other thing that we could do is fund right now because both S222 and S227 tax more than 50 cents per thousand, it means that we only have one option if we want to go to long-term borrowing, and that is by going to referendum. So by going to referendum, that's why Craig particularly said the roof having a lifespan of 45 years, 40 years, that does make long-term borrowing a viable choice. You would never, as Jeff said this morning in one of our other meetings, you would never do long-term borrowing over an asset that's longer than what the asset is going to last. So in this case, you actually have that fundamental piece that we could do. And so that could change things quite a bit, but it would mean that I need to add the costs of referendum. We have the risk of referendum, and it actually means that I can't do the work. So anything that requires that borrowing, we could not technically start because I wouldn't have the funding until we did referendum, or we plan this budget the way it is, 5 years borrowing, we do the work and we do referendum. So that even if the referendum fails, we have the permission to borrow that funding over 5 years. So that's your fallback. That's really the most simplest options that I see. Defer work, go to referendum, borrow longer than 5 years for the 9/11. You have a meeting on the workshops this Thursday? We have a workshop Thursday, which we start to talk about other bigger things. So you may not be able to answer everything until you have that workshop.
I do see a few hands. I'm sorry, I have another meeting I need to get to, so I am just going to ask for a motion to hand the chair off to Henny, and I'll give my really quick thoughts, and then I will do that. So is there a motion? I'll make that motion. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Not seeing any. Can I ask for approval to move the chair over to Henny? All those in favor? We're good, great, excellent. My only thoughts would be is I do not want to postpone anything. I do not think that postponing is an option for us. I think we've been postponing for 30 years. So let's not do that. Let's make sure we're doing whatever we need to do to keep up. And the only clarification question is that, so people who are paying into both services are going to see a pretty smooth tax increase, a pretty sustained tax increase. The challenge will be that the section in Area I that only pays into one service, they will see a lot of fluctuation over the next 5 years because of that. Is that correct?
Well, ironically, the people that are not participating in the aquatic service will see a reduction in their taxation.
But just for this year. And then it'll,
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
that's more what I meant.
Yeah.
So over the 5 years, they'll see a bit more of this, whereas the
Yeah.
average, everyone else who's into both services will actually, between the two, see a steady increase to get to what we need.
More or less, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, everyone. You see Councillor Heaton, that's not what I meant. Commissioner Heaton.
Thank you.
So this, yeah, I see Sue's got her hand up.
Sorry. Sorry, what's the workshop on Thursday, Bob?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
I broke, another tooth in Mexico, and I have a dental appointment at 1. I just need to know if I need
2 o'clock.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Heaton, I digress. I'm already doing a terrible job. Go ahead.
No, sorry, you broke a tooth too. That's, yeah. I think I'm thinking that we stayed the course, that this is our plan. This was what we had envisioned. We knew this was going to come because there's a lot of capital works. And I think we have clear direction from the area, just from, the surveys that we just completed, that people really want us to maintain the building because we really haven't been doing that for 30 years. So I think this is why we have reserves and we can kind of move our money around. So I think, Joe, how you explained it in that, I think we stayed the course and this is how we have to do it. Just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Brian, Commissioner Bogle or Commissioner Davidoff, do either of you have anything you want to say?
I believe we need to stay the course.
Okay.
Stay with the plan. Don't delay.
Commissioner Davidoff.
Yeah, so my first question is, what workshop do we have on Thursday?
Through the chair, it's the Castlegar and District Engagement Project Workshop.
At 1 o'clock, right?
Working group meeting, 2 o'clock. I've scheduled an hour and a half by the looks of it.
Okay, I have it down. Oh, I see what happened. I wrote it. I didn't have room left on Thursday, and I put it in on the Friday, 2 to 3:30, right?
That's correct.
And do we have something at 1?
No, Henny does.
I have a dental appointment.
And then, okay, so I just gotta, I see it now. I see where, yeah, okay, sorry. And then I do have a comment. I'm just trying to understand the budget, and I guess I have a question to our CAO, the Stewart. Can you see anything here that we should look at that I'm missing? Full stop.
Through the chair, at first glance, not really, because if you look at the capital budget you've got in 2025 of 1.675 million, you're pulling 1.2 from reserves and you've got a $200,000 surplus. So that means that there's a portion of your capital expenditures that are actually coming from the requisition in 2025.
Yes.
Like, there's a huge capital budget next year that needs to be dealt with. Like, I don't see anything right off the bat that would, like, other than Joe said, delaying is the only thing you could do. Because even going to referendum and pushing the borrowing out doesn't change 2025.
Yeah.
Because your payments aren't due till 2026 anyway.
Yeah. So supplemental, Chair, if I may, to Stewart.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, we're burning all our reserves, taking this year, right? And then what we're doing is that we're not going to have any reserves, but we are going to finish these projects and then we start from scratch again, building our reserves. Is that correct, Stuart? Am I getting it right?
Based on my review of Joe's spreadsheet, yeah, through the chair, that's correct.
So then if there's an emergency or something like that, we could borrow if we needed to, but we wouldn't have the reserves to pay for it, correct?
Through the chair, yes. If an emergency happened in 2025, you might have to reprioritize your projects or look at another source of borrowing. But let's hope that the capital planning we've been doing the last couple of years means that something like that is less likely to come up.
Okay. So our arena, everything's good in the arena. We don't have any surprises with anything there, that because that's happened before.
No, through the chair, I'll just, I think, we're up to date on the assessments. We're looking at the all the reports. Nothing comes up as far as very costly repair at the arena. The only thing I would say about the arena side is the Zamboni is showing some signs of age. We're repairing it, but if that came to the commission, that's a $150,000 to $200,000 conversation. We'd let you know well in advance of that so we could plan for it.
And our chiller, we've been checking everything, and we're on top of the chiller.
Through the chair, that everything in the refrigeration plant is operating. We spend a significant amount of money maintaining that every year. I think it's up to $20,000, if not more, that we have mechanical contractors in there, and they haven't told us that anything's of major risk right now.
And boilers?
Everything's good. All of the building mechanical is operating as designed.
Okay. And HVAC units?
Yeah, the RTUs, we're replacing 2 rooftop units this year, yes.
And anything else that you can foresee?
There are potentially the parking lot, potentially the skate park, things like that, but there is no major repairs other than the roof, which is pretty important, that we're looking at doing. We have 4 roof projects on the go this year.
Yep.
So that is our focus.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask those questions. I'm just looking ahead.
I get it. Okay, on to Director Heaton-Shire Commissioner. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Hedendorf. I'm just a little statement here. This is why we had such a robust discussion last year, saying, was $800,000 enough? Because we have all this capital coming on, right? And we all decided we'll stick with that 800,000 this year, 900 next, $1 million. But we can see, like, we have a lot of capital stuff, and as I said, we can't delay it any longer, right? And if something comes up, an emergency, something breaks or whatever, we'll deal with it then. But I like the plan that you have, Joe and Craig and staff. I say we go with it, and because things need to be done.
Okay, and before we move along, I'm going to say I'm stay the course. We have the hard discussions around this plan way back, a couple years ago now. I think delaying will create more problems than it will actually solve. So I say let's stay the course, get it done, and yeah. So what's next? Is that it for Craig's? Okay, so Pioneer Arena update. Sue. You guys, I'm sorry, I've been on the road all day. I am so tired. Tricia.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is really quick, much quicker than the budget, I promise. This is just to give an update to remind everyone, and for the benefit of any public that pay attention to our meetings, to know that the last operational day of the Pioneer is Sunday, March the 2nd. And further to our meeting that we had back in January, where we were talking about the BC 2026 BC Winter Games coming to the area, I did reach out to all of the ongoing user groups, and part of the correspondence related to that event was also to remind those groups of the closure of the Pioneer. So I know a lot more communication will be coming out both through the city and joint with the regional district regarding that. And so there will be some additional information in the coming weeks. But just to be aware and for the public's benefit, reminder that we're going to see the Pioneer close.
All right. I don't think anyone has anything to say to that, do they? Not to tell you what you're doing, but okay. Tricia, again, engagement project update.
Well, and you guys kind of stole a bit of the thunder through the chair regarding the workshop. So again, for the public record, the probably one of the last meetings to wind up the particular project work will be this Thursday with the working group at 2:00 here at the complex. And that, of course, will involve all members of the working group to review the final report, provide any feedback, and then go back to our consultant to tidy up any things that we think need to be tidied up, and then develop or initiate our communication plan to the public about that report, where to find it, and ideally what our next steps will be with it. So that is all coming to conclusion, more or less, for the project itself. And then the next phase of work will begin.
Great. Does anyone have anything they want to say about that?
Yeah, Chair, just in terms of budgeting and things like that, I don't see anything in the budget for reimagining. Is that something that could happen after we do the workshop and have a meeting, or we just don't have anything built into the budget and into the 5-year plan with respect to reimagining? I don't see anything there.
So through the chair, to Director Davidoff, in one of Craig's slides, he alluded to it as well, but there's some in consulting fees, 54040, I believe, is the actual account. There's a small amount of the $55,000 budget, I believe, for that account that is a carry forward of the project we're finishing right now, as well as approximately $50,000 of that is earmarked for whatever we believe our next step is in this calendar year.
Okay, so basically, if there were a supplemental, Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Yeah, so if there were to be anything that we're looking at, that probably we would have discussions about it during the 2026 budget deliberations. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it might depend what our next steps are. I think it might be premature maybe to really forecast that. Director Davidoff, I think once the working group has had a chance to consider what next steps might be, and it might be dependent on the choice of what that next step is as to how that plays out, both this year where we want to put that money and or into subsequent years after 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy, you're good. Commissioner Heaton Schuster-Stevito, go ahead.
Thank you. I think, Andy, you might have been thinking, is there enough money for a referendum if we're going to go that route? And I think that $50,000 would cover it if we go that route. I think you guys said it was 40,000 or something for a referendum.
Depends on the referendum.
Yeah, through the chair, I think, Stu, that's still kind of the number we work with.
Okay, is there anything else on this? We're all good. Commissioner Bogle, you're good, hey? In sunny California?
Everything's good.
No fires in your neck of the woods?
Okay, so
I'd like to thank you for taking over, though, Commissioner Vandegraff. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to call for public time now. There's no one in the room. So is there anyone online? Any members of the public online?
Yeah, we have a John, a Rob. Can we just minimize? Sure. Yeah.
John and Rob. Do either of you have a question for the commission?
Can you hear me? This is John Sokolowski.
Hi, John.
Hi. Yes, I have one question from, I'm not sure if I got the understanding quite right. I mean, you can draw down reserves, which is good, and you got a surplus to put toward assessments this year. So what is the impact going to be on property taxes for, say, the city of Castlegar for 2025?
I think, John, unless, through the chair, unless you ever, Stuart, have something, the regional district has a special budget meeting on the 17th, is that right? This is coming up here, and then the public meetings will come. At those public meetings, we'll be presenting like what those impacts look like across the different, like whether you're in the city of Castlegar, area I or area J.
Oh, okay, so you, at this point, at this point, you can't figure that out, I guess, until after further discussion, right?
Yeah.
And
All
it's
right.
hard not knowing if you're the city of Castlegar or area I or area J.
Okay.
That's a complicating factor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But thanks for attending the meeting.
All right. It was interesting. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Rob, did you have anything you wanted to ask? Okay. I think we'll adjourn, right? Okay, adjourned at 6:17. Next meeting will be March 7th at 4 o'clock. I did that backwards, but whatever.
Thanks, everybody.